The massive doors of the United Nations Assembly Hall sealed shut with a heavy thud that echoed through the chamber. Every world leader sat in tense silence as technicians worked frantically to establish the alien communication link. The air felt thick with anticipation and fear. President Parkana gripped the armrests of her chair, her knuckles white beneath the dim lighting. She had seen the preliminary reports from the deep space monitoring stations. The signals were real. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. Their first contact was not the peaceful greeting they had hoped for. Admiral Kim Tae sat 3 seats away, his weathered face a mask of controlled tension. At 52, he had spent his entire career preparing for wars between nations, never imagining he might face a threat from the stars. His fingers drummed silently against his knee as he studied the faces around him. Some showed curiosity, others terror, but all shared the same question. What did these aliens want? The holographic projector hummed to life, casting dancing shadows across the assembly hall's walls. Static filled the air before the image stabilized into something that made several delegates gasp aloud. The being that appeared before them stood, nearly 8 feet tall, its body composed of what looked like living crystal. Light bent and refracted through its translucent skin, creating rainbow patterns that shifted with each movement. Its face was angular and sharp, carved from diamond, with eyes that glowed like twin stars. Lesser species of the third planet, the creature spoke, its voice resonating with an authority that seemed to press against their minds. Every word carried the weight of ages, as if this being had spoken to countless worlds before Earth. Am High Chancellor Vextel of the Celestial Dominion. Defense Minister Li Wu leaned forward in his seat, his face pale. He had read the intelligence reports about the energy signatures detected at the edge of their solar system. Ships, hundreds of them, waiting just beyond Pluto's orbit. Your primitive civilization has been noted entering our galactic domain, Vexel continued, its crystalline features showing no emotion. For 10,000 of your years, we have maintained order among the stars. Every species that achieves interstellar travel must acknowledge our authority. As decreed by eternal law, we will present tribute and kneel before the crystal throne of Zenthara within 1 solar cycle. The alien's image flickered slightly as it began listing demands that made the blood drain from every face in the room. Half of Earth's rare metal deposits, advanced technology blueprints, 1 million human beings to serve as laborers on distant worlds, complete surrender of military forces, the transformation of Earth into a vassal state, its people reduced to servants of an empire they had never known existed. Kim Tae felt his jaw clench tighter with each demand. His grandfather had told him stories of the Japanese occupation, of his great-grandfather who had died fighting for Korean independence. His father had served in the Korean War, defending their homeland against invasion. Now, as he sat in this chamber listening to aliens demand humanity's subjugation, same fire that had burned in his ancestors' hearts ignited within him. Refusal, Vextel stated with casual indifference, as if discussing the weather results in extinction. Our fleets have reduced defiant worlds to cosmic dust. We have done this before. We will do it again if necessary. Choose wisely, primitives. You have 1 solar cycle. The hologram vanished, leaving the assembly hall in stunned silence. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The weight of the ultimatum settled over them like a burial shroud. Then the chaos began. Voices erupted from every corner of the chamber. Some delegates shouted for immediate surrender, others demanded military action. President Park hammered her gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order as the debate spiraled into near panic. We have to comply. Defense Minister Li Wu's voice cut through the noise. They claim to rule 1,000 worlds. We've barely managed to establish a colony on Mars. Our most advanced weapons are primitive toys compared to interstellar technology. And what happens after we submit? Kim Tae rose from his seat, his voice carrying the authority of decades in military service. They take our resources, our people, our freedom. We become slaves to creatures we've never seen, on worlds we'll never visit. Better slaves than extinct. Someone shouted from the back. Kim turned to face the assembly, his eyes blazing with determination. My ancestors died fighting the Japanese occupation. They chose death over slavery. My grandfather fought in the Korean War, defending our soil against invaders. I will not be the generation that surrenders Earth to aliens without a fight. Debate raged for 6 hours. Military advisors presented grim assessments of Earth's defensive capabilities. Scientists spoke about the technological gap between humanity and their would-be conquerors. Diplomats suggested negotiation, strategies that sounded increasingly desperate. As the sun set outside the assembly hall windows, President Park called for a final vote. The chamber fell silent as she looked directly at Admiral Kim Tae. As our highest-ranking military officer, what is your recommendation? Kim stood slowly, his uniform bearing the weight of every battle his nation had ever fought. Madam President, if we're going to die anyway, let's die fighting. Let's die as free humans rather than live as alien slaves. The vote was closer than expected, but the decision was made. 3 days later, Earth's response was broadcast across the galaxy on every frequency. We are humanity. We kneel to no throne. The warning sirens screamed across every human settlement from Earth to the Mars colonies. Deep space sensors had detected the impossible sight that would haunt humanity's nightmares for generations to come. 200 alien warships had appeared at the edge of their solar system like ghosts, materializing from the darkness of space. Admiral Kim Tae stood on the bridge of the converted cargo ship Soul's Pride, watching the enemy fleet through the main view screen. The alien vessels were unlike anything human engineers had ever imagined. Their hulls seemed to be made of living crystal that caught and twisted starlight into brilliant rainbows. Each ship was easily 3 times larger than humanity's biggest military vessel, and their smooth surfaces rippled with energy that spoke of weapons beyond human understanding. Beautiful, whispered Navigation Officer Park Soo from her station. They're actually beautiful. Kim nodded grimly. So are poisonous flowers. Doesn't make them any less deadly. Around him, his bridge crew worked with the desperate efficiency of people who knew they were about to die. The Soul's Pride had been a simple cargo hauler just 3 months ago, carrying supplies between Earth and the asteroid mining stations. Now her cargo holds were packed with missiles, her hull reinforced with whatever armor plating they could find, and her crew trained in combat tactics they had learned from old military manuals. The rest of Earth's hastily assembled fleet was no better. 53 ships in total, most of them converted civilian vessels pressed into military service, mining ships with industrial lasers retrofitted as weapons, research vessels carrying experimental particle beams, even a few luxury yachts whose wealthy owners had volunteered their ships for the defense of humanity. Against them came 200 warships of an empire that had conquered 1,000 worlds. Sir, Communications Officer Choi Min called out, his voice tight with tension. The enemy fleet is moving into attack formation. We're receiving a transmission. Put it on screen. The view screen flickered and showed a new alien face. This creature was different from the crystalline being who had delivered the ultimatum. Its skin looked like polished black stone, smooth and reflective, with eyes that glowed like molten gold. When it spoke, its voice carried the casual confidence of someone who had never known defeat. I am Fleet Admiral Corthus of the Celestial Dominion, the alien announced. You have chosen poorly, humans. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift. Continue this foolishness, and we will make your suffering legendary. Kim stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back in the military posture his father had taught him decades ago. Counter-offer. Leave our system now, and we'll let you live. For a moment, the alien's expression didn't change. Then something that might have been laughter rippled across its obsidian features. Primitive courage. How refreshing. It has been centuries since we encountered such entertaining defiance. You will make excellent examples for the next species. That considers rebellion. Transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Kim could feel the eyes of his crew upon him, waiting for orders that would likely be their last. He thought of his daughter back on Earth, probably watching the news broadcasts with tears in her eyes. She had begged him not to volunteer for this suicide mission, but he had kissed her forehead and explained that some fights were worth dying for. All ships, he broadcast to the human fleet. Remember what we discussed? We don't need to win this battle. We just need to hurt them. We need to show the galaxy that the celestial dominion can bleed. The battle began near Luna's orbit, where Earth's moon had watched over humanity for millions of years. The Dominion fleet advanced in perfect formation, ships moving with mechanical precision that spoke of 10,000 years of military tradition. Energy beams lanced out from their weapons, striking human vessels with devastating accuracy. The first ship to die was the converted freighter Mokpo's Dream. The alien beam punched through her hull like it was made of paper, and she exploded in a ball of flame that briefly outshone the stars. But before the wreckage had even finished scattering, the human fleet was moving. Kim had studied every naval battle in human history during the frantic weeks of preparation. He knew that smaller, weaker forces could sometimes hurt larger ones. Through unconventional tactics, his ships scattered like leaves in a hurricane. Using the moon's gravity and the debris fields of the asteroid belt to break up the alien formation, remember, he broadcast again as energy beams crisscrossed the space around them. Hit and run. Make them chase us. Use everything we have. The converted mining ship Busan Thunder was the first to score a kill. Captain Li Jin had loaded her cargo hold with every explosive they could find, then accelerated directly toward the largest Dominion vessel. The aliens tried to destroy her with their energy weapons, but Jin kept his ship moving in an unpredictable spiral that made targeting difficult. For Earth, Jin's voice crackled over the radio as his ship struck the alien vessel's engine section. The explosion was visible from Mars. Two ships dying together in a burst of light that painted the darkness. The research vessel Incheon Dream lasted longer. Using her experimental particle accelerator to punch holes in alien armor before return, fire finally silenced her forever. One by one, the human ships died, but they took alien vessels with them. Mining lasers carved through crystalline holes, improvised missiles found gaps in alien defenses. Ramming attacks sent enemy ships spinning into the void. When the battle finally ended, Earth's fleet was gone. But 3 Dominion dreadnoughts drifted as burning hulks, and 2 more limped away with critical damage. Admiral Kim Tae floated in an escape pod, watching the footage being broadcast across the galaxy for the first time in 1,000 years. Someone had made the celestial dominion bleed deep beneath the dark waters of Aquanus, in trenches so deep that sunlight had never touched them. Something ancient began to stir. The Nariel had built their cities in these crushing depths 3,000 years ago, before the celestial dominion had come to their world with promises of peace that turned into chains of slavery. Elder Kethmala floated in the council chamber, her gill slits fluttering with barely contained excitement. Round her, other Nariel leaders moved through the water with the grace their species had perfected over millions of years of evolution. Their skins shimmered with bioluminescent patterns. That served as their written language, and today those patterns spelled out words that had been forbidden for centuries. Hope, her patterns read. Resistance. Freedom. The transmission had reached them through channels the Dominion thought they had destroyed long ago. Hidden receivers built into the walls of their underwater cities had picked up the signal from Earth, bouncing it through a network of rebel sympathizers spread across dozens of worlds. The message was simple but powerful. Humanity had fought back. The invincible celestial dominion had been hurt. They actually did it, whispered Commander Taloneth, his own light patterns flickering with amazement. These humans destroyed Dominion. Warships, they made them bleed. For 3 centuries, the Neriel had lived under the boot of their alien masters. Their beautiful cities had been turned into factories. Their children were taken away to serve as laborers on distant worlds. Their ancient songs had been silenced, their culture slowly strangled by laws that made even speaking their native language a crime punishable by death. But now, in the deepest parts of their oceans where Dominion surveillance could not reach, the Neo-Riel were singing again. Captain Yoon-soo was checking the navigation systems on his makeshift command ship when the first coded transmission arrived. The message had been sent through an old smuggler's channel that most people thought was dead, crypted with patterns that took his communications officer 3 hours to decode. Earth's fire burns bright, the message read. How do we join the flame? Yoon felt his heart skip a beat as he read the coordinates that followed. Aquanus, a water world in the outer rim that had been conquered so long ago that most people had forgotten it had ever been free. The Nereal were reaching out, offering to help in humanity's desperate fight against impossible odds. Within hours, similar messages began flooding in from across the galaxy. The insectoid Thexkari sent detailed maps of Dominion weapons storage facilities. The silicon-based Mordani, who had been enslaved to work in the Empire's mines, offered to sabotage mining operations that supplied raw materials for the Dominion fleet. Species that had been conquered so long ago they had forgotten their own names were suddenly remembering what freedom meant. On the throne world of Zenthara, Emperor Velcanus received the reports with growing fury. He sat upon the crystal throne that had been carved from a single massive gem, his crystalline features twisted with rage that made the air around him shimmer with heat. The throne room was vast enough to hold 1,000 beings, its walls covered with the surrendering weapons of conquered species. For 10,000 years, representatives of defeated worlds had knelt before this throne, offering their submission to the eternal empire. Now, those same worlds were rising in rebellion. Impossible. The Emperor's crystalline fist struck the armrest of his throne with such force that the impact rang through the chamber like a great bell. Several of the decorative crystals that lined the walls cracked from the sound. No species has ever dared to resist after we demonstrated our power. Did these primitive humans inspire such madness? Chancellor Morthic, the Emperor's most trusted advisor, bowed so low that his face nearly touched the polished floor. He had served the throne for 800 years, had seen the conquest of dozens of worlds, but never had he witnessed anything like this, my lord. Perhaps we underestimated the psychological impact of their resistance. The footage of our ships burning has spread to every corner of the galaxy. Silence. The Emperor's voice was so loud that it shattered several of the smaller crystals entirely, sending rainbow fragments scattering across the floor. Guards stationed around the chamber flinched at the sound, their energy weapons humming to life before they remembered where they were. I will not have my reign remembered as the time when primitives defied the eternal order. Mobilize the Death Fleet. I want their entire solar system turned to ash and scattered across the void. But even as the Emperor raged, the rebellion was already spreading beyond his ability to contain it. In hidden bases carved into asteroids, unlikely allies were meeting for the first time. Admiral Kim Tae, one of the few survivors of humanity's desperate last stand, found himself sitting across a metal table from beings he had never imagined existed. Commander Taloneth of the Nereal wore a water-filled helmet that allowed him to breathe in the asteroid base's atmosphere. His gill slits moved rhythmically as he studied human military tactics on a holographic display. Beside him, Thornsinger Valandra of the Scytherin communicated through patterns of color that shifted. Across her leaf-like skin like living artwork, your guerrilla tactics, Taloneth's voice gurgled through his breathing apparatus. They could work on the factory worlds. My people know every tunnel, every hidden passage in the Dominion facilities. Valandra's leaves flashed bright yellow, which Kim had learned meant excitement. Human stubbornness, she said, her voice like wind through trees. It spreads like pollen on the wind. Other species see your example and remember their own strength. Smiled for the first time since the battle at Luna. Then let's spread the infection. The rebellion began small, with attacks that the Dominion initially dismissed as isolated incidents. A supply convoy disappeared near the Mordani mining worlds. A garrison post on the Xkari Prime went silent during the night shift. Weapons shipments never reached their destinations. But the Celestial Dominion had ruled through fear for so long that when their ships started exploding and their facilities began burning, their authority crumbled faster than they could comprehend. The space around Proxima Nexus had become a graveyard of burning metal and shattered dreams. What started as a simple mission to steal Dominion supply ships had turned into the largest space battle in galactic history. For 6 days, the darkness between stars had been lit by the flash of energy weapons and the dying screams of warships. Colonel Bei Min gripped the command chair of his destroyer as another explosion rocked the ship. The Daegu's Revenge had been a proud vessel of the Earth Defense Force, but now her hull was scarred with battle damage, and her crew was running on coffee and determination. Around him, his bridge crew worked at their stations with the focused intensity of people who knew they were fighting for more than just their lives. Dominion battlecruiser closing on our port side, called out sensor operator Jung Ha, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. Range 2,000 kilometers and closing fast. Aerial torpedo bombers incoming on the starboard flank, she added, watching the tactical display as friendly blue dots raced toward enemy red ones. The Excari fighters are providing cover for their attack run. The bridge shook again as enemy fire struck their shields. Through the main view screen, Min could see the battle raging in all directions. Hundreds of ships from dozens of species were locked in deadly combat, their weapons creating a light show that would have been beautiful if it hadn't been so deadly. "Sir," Communications Officer Park Du turned from his station, his face grim. "The Scytheran bioships are requesting permission to execute Pattern Omega." Min nodded without hesitation. Pattern Omega was a desperate tactic that the plant-like Scytheran had developed during their centuries of slavery. Their living ships would sacrifice themselves to create openings in enemy formations, growing explosive pods that could punch through even the strongest armor. Granted, signal all ships to prepare for synchronized strike. The rebel fleet moved like a single organism, each species bringing their own unique abilities to the fight. Human ships formed the backbone of the formation, their heavy weapons providing covering fire, while their commanders coordinated the complex dance of battle. The aerial vessels moved through the enemy formation like fish swimming through coral reefs, their streamlined hulls slipping past Dominion defenses to strike at vulnerable points. High above the main battle, the Excari fighters swarmed around. The larger ships, like angry insects, their natural hive mind, allowed them to coordinate attacks with perfect precision, diving in groups to overwhelm enemy point defenses before darting away to strike elsewhere. The Scytheran bioships were, perhaps, the most disturbing sight of all. These living vessels pulsed with organic energy, their whole skin changing color as they analyzed enemy weaknesses in real time. When they found a gap in Dominion armor, they would grow specialized weapons within seconds, adapting to each new threat like a virus learning to overcome medicine. "Enemy formation is breaking up," Jung Ha reported, her voice filled with cautious hope. "But we're losing ships fast. The Bison's light just went dark, and the aerial cruiser Deep Current is venting atmosphere." Min watched the tactical display. As blue dots representing Allied ships winked out one by one, they were giving better than they got, but the Dominion had numbers on their side. 3 full battle fleets had converged on the rebel position, and even with their mixed-species tactics, the mathematics of war were working against them. That was when Captain Song I made her decision. From the bridge of the frigate Gwangju's, fire. She could see a gap in the Dominion formation where 2 enemy squadrons had moved apart to engage separate rebel groups. It was a small opening, probably temporary, but it led straight to the heart of the enemy fleet where their command ships were coordinating the battle. "All ships, this is Song Hai," she broadcast on the open channel, her voice calm, despite what she was about to do. "I'm taking a mixed squadron through the gap. Cover our approach." Min watched in horror as the Gwangju's fire accelerated toward the enemy formation, followed by 6 other ships of various species. "Song Hai, negative. That's a suicide run. Pull back." But it was too late. The small squadron was already committed, racing through the narrow gap between enemy battle groups. Dominion weapons fire converged on them like deadly rain, and one by one, the escort ships were destroyed. The aerial destroyer Tydekler exploded in a ball of blue fire. The Excari cruiser's Swarmheart broke apart under concentrated fire from 3 different directions. Only the Gwangju's fire made it through, her hull glowing red-hot from near misses and her shields failing in a cascade of sparks. Song Hai pushed her ship's engines past their safety limits, racing toward the massive Dominion command vessel that loomed ahead like a crystalline mountain. "This is for Earth," she broadcast as alarms screamed throughout her ship. "This is for everyone who ever refused to kneel." The Guangzhou's fire struck the command ship's central hull just as her reactor went critical. The explosion was visible from both ends of the battle zone, a new star that briefly outshone the system's sun. When the light faded, the Dominion command ship was gone, along with 2 nearby cruisers that had been caught in the blast, without their central coordination. The Dominion fleet began to fall apart. Individual ships continued fighting, but they could no longer work together effectively. The rebel fleet, despite their losses, pressed their advantage with desperate courage. When the battle finally ended, the space around Proxima Nexus was filled. With debris from both sides, the rebel fleet had lost 60% of their ships. But all 3 Dominion fleets had been completely destroyed. More importantly, the entire battle had been recorded and broadcast across the galaxy. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Celestial Dominion had been defeated in open battle. On the throne world of Zenthara, Emperor Velcanus received the news while surrounded by kneeling ambassadors from a dozen subject species. Crystalline features twisted with rage as he processed the impossible report. "Enough," he whispered, his voice carrying a deadly calm that made his courtiers tremble. Then he roared, "Enough. Recall all fleets. I will not allow these primitive humans to destroy everything we have built." But across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds where beings had forgotten what freedom felt like, the fire of rebellion was already burning too bright to extinguish. The ancient crystal throne of Zenthara had witnessed the surrender of 1,000 worlds. For 10,000 years, it had stood as the symbol of absolute power, carved from a single massive gem that old legends claimed had fallen from the stars themselves. Millions of beings from across the galaxy had knelt before it, trading their freedom for the promise of peace under Dominion rule. Today, smoke filled the throne room, and the crystal walls cracked from the heat of plasma fire. The sound of battle echoed through corridors that had known only silence and whispered submission for centuries. Admiral Kimte pushed through the chaos, his battle armor scorched black from the fighting in the outer palace. Around him, the final assault continued as human marines fought side by side with alien allies who had dreamed of this moment for generations. Nereal warriors moved through the smoke like deadly fish, their water-filled breathing suits gleaming in the firelight. The Xkari shock troops advanced in perfect formation, their insect-like coordination allowing them to clear room after room with ruthless efficiency. The most disturbing sight was the Scytheran bioweapons. These living tools had grown from the plant-like species' own bodies, acid pods that could eat through any barrier the Dominion had built. As Kim watched, one of these weapons dissolved a massive crystal barricade in seconds. Clearing the path to the throne itself, Emperor Velcanus, Kim shouted above the noise of battle, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had led the greatest rebellion in galactic history. "Face me. Your guards are dead. Your fleets are scattered. Come out and face what you have created." The answer came from behind the throne itself. Emperor Velcanus emerged like a nightmare made real. His crystalline armor cracked and bleeding light from a dozen wounds. This was not the godlike figure who had appeared in holograms across the galaxy. This was an ancient being driven to madness by the collapse of everything he had built. "You have destroyed everything," Velcanus screamed, his voice breaking with rage and despair. 10,000 years of order. 10,000 years of peace. You primitive animals have torn down the greatest civilization the galaxy has ever known. Kim drew his plasma sword, its blue energy blade cutting through the smoke like a beacon of hope. "Peace. You call slavery peace? You call the death of entire cultures peace? I brought stability to chaos." The Emperor raised his own weapon, an energy blade that had been forged in the heart of a dying star. Before the Dominion, this galaxy was torn apart by endless wars. Species destroyed each other over scraps of territory. I ended that madness by destroying freedom itself, Kim replied, advancing slowly across the rubble-strewn floor. By turning entire civilizations into factories for your empire. By stealing children from their parents to serve as your laborers. They clashed in the shadow of the toppling throne. Velcanus was older than some civilizations, his body enhanced by 10,000 years of Dominion technology. His blade moved with the speed of lightning, each strike capable of cutting through the strongest armor. But Kim fought with something. The Emperor had never understood the fury of every human who had ever refused to kneel. Their weapons met in showers of sparks that lit up the ruined throne room. Valkanus fought with the skill of ages, but Kim fought with the desperate strength of someone who knew that defeat meant the end of everything he loved. Around them, the battle continued, but the two combatants seemed to exist in their own world. Of flashing blades and deadly determination, the end came suddenly. Valkanus saw an opening and lunged forward with all his remaining strength, aiming for Kim's heart. But the Emperor had grown too confident in his superior skill. He overextended himself, leaving his own defenses open for just a moment. Kim's plasma blade found the gap in the crystalline armor, sliding between the plates to pierce the Emperor's chest. Valkanus gasped, his glowing eyes going wide with shock. For a moment, he seemed about to speak, perhaps to curse his killer or to finally understand what he had done wrong. Instead, he simply fell. The Emperor of 1,000 Worlds died not in glory on his throne, but on his knees in the wreckage of his palace, his blood mixing with the crystal dust that covered the floor. "It's done," Kim spoke into his communicator, his voice barely above a whisper. "The Emperor is dead. The Dominion surrenders." The silence that followed was broken only by the distant sound of celebrations echoing through the palace corridors. Across the galaxy, beings who had lived their entire lives under the Dominion's rule were learning what it meant to be free. 3 months later, the same throne room had been transformed beyond recognition. The crystal walls had been repaired, but the throne itself was gone. In its place stood a circular table where representatives from 847 liberated worlds sat as equals. The fragments of the crystal throne had been melted down and distributed to every member world, small pieces of crystal that would serve as reminders of what they had overcome. President Park Hanna stood before the assembly, no longer the frightened, the leader who had first received the Dominion's ultimatum. The war had changed her as it had changed everyone who survived it. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had helped forge a new age. "We did not fight to become conquerors," she declared to the assembled representatives. "We fought because sometimes the only answer to tyranny is fire. Today we choose to build rather than burn. Today we choose to create rather than destroy." The applause that followed was thunderous, shaking the rebuilt chamber with the sound of hope itself. In the place where the crystal throne had once stood, a simple inscription had been carved into the floor in 1,000 different languages. "We kneel to no throne," and across the galaxy, on worlds that had forgotten what freedom meant, children of dozens of species were learning humanity's greatest gift, the simple, revolutionary power of the word no.